Yes, or like they need. Yeah, just forgotten to set recording, but it gets to a place where people find it very difficult to go past the criticism, past the feedback that can be sometimes very painful, depending also on the journals that you're publishing. Remember, there, I don't know whether you know, but there are categories of journals. There's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and these they're categorized dependent on the extent of rigor that they brought into their article publication processes, the quality they look for, and all that. I aim for Q1 and Q2 because this, if you manage to publish there, you can publish anywhere. I can tell you that much. But they're also not very easy to publish there because of the rigorous process that they put an author through. But if you manage to do that, you'll be on a very good place to begin with and going forward. And so I publish a lot in Q1 and Q2 journals, but I started with Q4. They're not bad. It's just that they're just entry level, not so much of a rigor, not so much of a rejection and all that. Then Q3, you know, they go a little bit above Q4. There's quite a bit of a rigor there. The rejection rate is also almost high. And then Q2 and Q1, the rejection rate is almost 90%. And they even have included in their journal, you know, web pages that there's just be aware that there's a high rejection rate. It's very scary when you see that kind of information as a first-time publisher. So strategy for me, I'm not saying this should be followed, but I'm saying my strategy then was to start somewhere, you know, where there is a higher level of acceptance. Not meaning that the quality is not good, but at least there is, you know, the rejection rate is low. And over time, I transitioned it to the higher levels of journals where really gets to a place of strain, if I used to use that word. But be as it might be, do not doubt your potential. Then they say, sometimes people say, I will not be recognized by my institution for not publishing an article. Forget about being recognized. If it's a passion and in something that you really value and you appreciate as part of your personal professional development, then recognition doesn't matter. It comes at certain stage, but it's not really something that you should aim for. I know there are people out there, publishers who really think that they do that. Actually, they love mentioning that they published 207, you know, articles and all that. Therefore, they need to be recognized for that. I think it's a very personal issue. Personally, that's not something that I aim for, and it comes. I receive it with thanks, but it's really not something that I aim for. So do not be caught by that. The other excuse is that I'm not an academic. We don't publish because we're academics. We publish because we love writing and we want to share our thoughts with the scholarly community out there. Yeah. So again, bust that bubble in case it gets around your life. You can publish for whatever you have, or you think it's strong enough to give, to share with the scholarly community out there and engage with people with your thoughts. And then the other one is circumstantial. I've got a family to look after. Yes, I understand. I do have one. But again, it's about negotiation and communication and all those things that you have to do to get your family to support you in that. Because as somebody indicated, I think it's Simo indicated in the chat box there, it's a daunting task, and it does require a lot of time to think through every section of your paper, collect your thoughts, do intense research of content that you want to put through and all those things. And they require time off from certain things so that you can be able to give yourself enough time to put a coherent and a reasonable article. So yes, we've got family, but families do support. They do not take you away from your passion if you really love writing. The other excuse, no more excuse, I'm too committed with to other things. Fine. If that's the case, then probably publishing is not your field, or is not something that you want to put in, because it requires time and it requires you to want to put enough effort around that. Okay, so this list is not exhaustive. I just wanted to provoke a conversation to say, first of all, get past the mindset that I cannot publish, I can do publish. I need to do the right thing by just recognizing that I have the capacity to do so. And so I hope by the end of this presentation, there will be no more excuses on your side. And two, you will set to yourself a goal to publish at least for this year if you didn't have one. And just start from where you are, right? The next item of our discussion is I would like us to talk about how to overcome the excuses. Again, these are my personal experiences, and I know you got yours, and I would like to know how you've overcome yours if you've published before. So I would like to give you a minute just to throw in your idea using our chat box. How did you manage to overcome your excuse if you did publish at some stage? Just for a minute, just put in your thought there. How did you do it before I discuss mine? How did you manage to overcome your excuse when you started publishing or decided to publish? I would like to know your experience also, right? Just go in, just throw in the right up there in the chat box, say how you did it, how you overcame your excuse, how you busted your bubble and said enough is enough. I'm getting into this world that I do not even know how it will function, whether I'm going to last, whether I'm even going to get published. I'm getting in, right? Let's go. Who'll be the first one to share their thought? How did you overcome your excuses? Still waiting? Anybody ready, courageous enough to share how they busted their own excuse bubble and started writing? There we go. Thank you, Fazila. I agree with you. That's really powerful. Claire, putting citing aside a little time and a good place and just do it. Nike it. Great stuff, right? I remember that very, very clearly. I used to do the same, and I still do that. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I think colleagues in different spaces just think if when they want to publish, they want to start the paper from this morning, and by afternoon they have a draft. Please, it doesn't work like that. I agree with you, Claire. Set a little time, start somewhere. Sometimes it's just the title of your paper, just the heading. I struggle with that. I don't know whether anybody else struggle with that. How do you make your title crisp and straight and clear, and it's not a paragraph, and it's not 3 sentences in 1 word? You know, how do you so we'll get to some of those things perhaps today, I don't know, but it just begins there. Sometimes it's just knocking off the idea and then the title. What would I title my topic? All that. Yeah, I see, Timothy, the drive to achieve was greater than the struggle. Great stuff. I agree with you. Once, especially, you have a goal, like I did mention mine in the beginning, that I always start with, you know, each year, irrespective of what the year will have, I want to make sure that I've submitted and published two articles in a peer-reviewed journal. It is not easy, but the goal is there. So that struggle is overcome by the passion. And I have to find something, and we can talk about the planning, because you don't wait until December 31st when people are writing resolution, then you put you are awesome. No, man, it doesn't go like that. When you have to have a plan, right? Okay, so there we go. Yeah, see, the idea of support, getting over the blank page syndrome. I agree with you, Claire, very 100%. I do the same. And, you know, just as I'm saying, just start with a blank paper page, just write the thought, then talk about, you think about your idea, the title of your paper. Sometimes again, yeah, you're thinking about you don't have support. Support is always there. If you look for it and you ask for it, you will get it. All right. So thank you so much, colleagues, for sharing your thoughts there. So these are mine. How did I overcome, and how do I constantly overcome every excuse to publish? And sometimes, and since we are talking about journals, I can also talk about books and how to do that. because I also do publish those. So I have two, when it comes to publishing personally, I have two goals here. So one is to publish at least 2 journal articles per year and at least co-edit 2 books together. And sometimes I stretch even to say publish at least 2 book chapters. So the goal is overwhelming. It busts every kind of excuse, because at the end of the year, I want to say, okay, so how did I do? What did I do? How did I come up? Because as M&E practitioners, we are constantly interacting with knowledge. We are generating some, and some we are gaining through our reading, and some we are gaining through our practice as we do. So there's always sources of information that should make you curious to think, okay, maybe I should take that idea forward from in a scholarly, point of view. So how do I overcome my excuses? Decide to write and start writing. I can't overemphasize that. You got to do that. Get that blank page as Claire is suggesting and do something about it. Then make time to write. Find little times during your day or during your week and don't say that I'm gonna get time this month. Let me tell you, 100% you'll not get it, because the month is too long for you to commit to something. But if you say this week, I will agree with you. I have done that and I constantly do that. I don't do well with days. If I say that today I must get it, it doesn't work so much sometimes because of the work situation and all the things that I need to take care of, but the week does work. And so make time. Find a quiet morning during the week where you can sit down and just jot your thoughts. Sometimes it's just putting your thoughts in point form, not even writing a paragraph, just point form, in bullet form. Once you've decided the topic or the area you want to write about. Then the third thing, engage your family and colleagues once you've decided to publish, so that they are aware of your plans and ask for their support. This is very important to burst that bubble about I don't have time, I have a family to look after, I got so much work to do at the office, I can't get time, all those excuses. So once you've decided you're going to write, engage with them. I do that constantly. And so that the support, define the support again. Sometimes support varies from one person to the next. So in your context, when you're engaging with your colleagues and family, define the support you need. Is it time off? Do you want to not to be disturbed when you're writing? All those things. And then everybody around you commit to support you in that way to get you going. Then, of course, start believing in your capabilities. Busting the bubble that I don't have potential, the bubble about self-doubt, all that. You have it. It's in there. As I remember, I use my small mantra, if I can eat, I can write. If I'm breathing, I can write. And if you tick boxes to those 2 boxes, then there's no other thing that you can use as an excuse. Then the potential is there, you can do it. Then the other excuse, not everything about publishing equals money. As I just said, not all journals around the world, including in South Africa, those that have been accredited by the Department of Higher Education, not all of them involve money. So don't let money stand in your way. Money can be an issue if you are collecting primary data, but again, there are ways to go around that. And you find easier ways to collect the data you need to, so long as it's data that can be substantiated in terms of general requirements and the final conclusions that you come up with in your paper. Then don't pay attention to recognition before you get published. If your starting point is to publish to be recognized, I humbly submit you're starting on the wrong place. Don't do that. You can't start publishing with an intention to be recognized. It becomes almost an impossible situation. Remember, there is also at some stage, maybe in the other follow-up webinar, we might look at the politics of publishing. And I can go in detail at that level at that time, but they are there. And so if you start with the recognition in mind, you're navigating in a very difficult contour that can be discouraging. Recognition comes afterward, and it's not guaranteed either. Then, of course, surround yourselves with colleagues who publish or have published for moral support. These are some of my ways I busted my excuses, and I discussed yours. And I think once we've done that, we're ready to start thinking about writing our next our paper. Now, in this slide, we're looking at why do you want to write scholarly articles? So here is a question of motive. And I want to think about we as M&E practitioners have some level of motive. So before I discuss some of those, I would like to give you a chance also in your chat box to write one, at least one. Why do you want to publish in a scholarly why do you want to publish a scholarly publication in a journal? What's your motivation? For a minute, let's get going. Just want to know some of your motivations before I share mine. Who's courageous to status? What's your motivation? Why do you want to publish in scholarly and put your thoughts there with in the scholarly community to engage with what you've done? There must be a motive. There must be an interest. Let's see. What's your motivation? Great stuff. Thank you, Fazila. Add the existing knowledge around the specific topic, 100%. That's why we as M&E practitioners and researchers and all that we do, we are always curious people. We want to know something when you see it. You want to dig deeper and see what's outside there that has been either published, or if it's not been published, you be the first one to provoke the conversation. Yes, Timothy, to develop professional expertise, 100%. This should be one of our foremost motivations, especially if you love publishing, if you love writing, but secondly, you're also interested in growing your professional expertise. And thirdly, you are just courageous enough to share your thoughts. It's also very scary when you think about it, that you want to put your thoughts in a pool of millions of people around the world, because wherever that journal is read, your thoughts will be read. And anyone from anywhere can come with all the ideas and trying to shoot down your thoughts and all that, including the editors themselves. So it's a powerful thing to develop your expertise as a professional by publishing, because it develops also your emotional resilience, but also it helps you to interact with the existing knowledge and situate your thoughts in that body of knowledge, just like Fazila said. Right, let's go on. The next 30 seconds. Anybody out there courageous enough to say, why do you want to write? Very interesting how even we go about mining, ideas. It's very interesting to know, how do people go about thinking about what they want to write? How do you start that process, right? Okay. There's a lot of power in learning how to write in your organization and career. Exactly, the motivation. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Just to add on that point, in 2007, I just finished my graduate studies, postgraduate studies, and I got employed in an organization where publishing was not the norm. So I was the first one to suggest to publish. It was also my first time to to present a conference paper at Samia's conference of that year. And so my executive director then challenged me and said, okay, I did present the paper at Samia conference, and I was awarded certificate as the best paper for the emerging researchers at the time. They had that kind of a category at the conference. So when I brought it back to work and shared that with my executive director, he told me then, now let's take it to the next step. Make sure it's published in a journal article, as a journal article. Wow, that was quite a daunting task. But again, sometimes you need to be in an environment where publishing is encouraged, because it does also motivate you to step in. But you may ask also, Paul, what about if I'm in an organization where publishing work is not encouraged? Then this is why you have to dig in deep inside of you and say, I'm going to do this for me as a professional development exercise. Right, and you win work by writing proposals. Yes, just hit on the nail. That's one of the things that we do as M&E practitioners. We're constantly writing these things, proposals and concepts and expressions of interest. Yeah. Okay. Kelebohile, I see the process of research allows professional empowerment. You develop yourself in areas of interest. Exactly. So that's also the other motivation. You want to, develop scholarly in the areas of your interest and create a niche for yourself in that place, so that you can also again earn a place on the table. Sometimes it becomes very interesting that this is also comes very close to the recognition factor. There are certain spaces people do not get appreciated if they have not been published before. I don't know who comes up with these criteria. I find them very limiting. Sometimes people carry ideas and thoughts that they have not put on paper yet, but they are very useful and need to be listened to. But anyway, this is the way the world sometimes is constructed, and it becomes an impeding process. All right, thank you so much, colleagues, for sharing those. Let's go on. Let me share mine. Some of those motivations, and I'm just trying to put them in a category just for the ease of conversation this morning. As we just discussed there's career motives, and sometimes journal articles get paid, especially at the university. The only challenging at the university is that the money doesn't come into your hands, it goes to your cost center, and there's always problems with the cost center. Anyways, those who are amongst us who have an idea of work in academia understand that. But there is always a monetary value, because you can use that money to travel to conferences and do other things that you want to do, including research. There's also the disciplinary motive. As I said, once you have a goal, the goal restrains you not to wander about. It makes you to focus so that you can spend your time thinking about writing. There's personal motives, as we just discussed there, self-improvement, professional development, pursuing your personal curiosities. We are emanating people. We are constantly interacting with the environment, generating data, and we want to know, what does this mean beyond what we see? So that's something else. For social motives, this is where we want to add to the body of knowledge to encourage, discussion at a policy level. And it's very important to make sure that sometimes it's not even at a policy level. Sometimes it's just to engage with the community that you're working with as an M&E practitioner. Where the community could be communities at window, it could be academic community around you, it could be professional network that you belong to, like like ours, KZN, NMELN. It could be that, and you just want to put out theirs. And so it's always important to have the motive right. And always, when you're starting to your writing process, always think about what's my intention with this writing. Apart from the overall one, I want to improve myself professionally, but what's the other underlying motive? I want to share these thoughts that I've found very important, that I've been curious about for a long time. I've managed to put them in a scholarly format. I want to engage the scholarly community with these thoughts. So you get to the deeper persuasions, so that it gives you the strength and the courage you need as you go ahead in your writing process. Again, as I said, the list is not exhaustive, but just to provoke our thinking, because every writing process has a motive behind, and it's always good to clear yourself. And of course, you are thinking about your audience constantly, so that the audience also shapes your writing and all that. Right. Types of publications. There are a lot of them, but here are some of them. So books, book chapters, invited work. Remember, I'm sure you constantly see there is a call for special issues for publications. And I would like to tell you just that upfront. When you see that a special issue call, jump into it. There's a very high chance you will get published, especially if your article gets assessed as outstanding and relevant to the call and the topics that they have invited people to write. I do take advantage of this also most of the time to increase the chances of getting a paper published, especially because they have very tight time frames, and they always, to my experience this far, they always stick to the time frames, so you can be sure at least the article will be published. But anyway, that's part of the invited work. Sometimes it's also commissioned work, where organizations or institutions of higher learning invite people or authors and from all kinds of places to submit their work and then get published. So there's always those opportunities. Please look out for them as often as you can. Then of course the journal articles, so you publish in accredited, sometimes in non-accredited, it doesn't really matter, depending, again, the question of motive. I do publish a lot on accredited, and sometimes I do publish in non-accredited journals because of the interest I have perhaps with that scholarly community reached by that journal. But you don't want to spend a lot of time publishing in non-accredited journals because the time effort is the same. They may not be accredited, but it doesn't mean that they don't have a standard of expectation about the quality of the papers that they do get, but the opportunities are there. Then, of course, the electronic publications, where it's just open source access and all that, and you're invited. Sometimes it's conference proceedings. It's also important when we have, for example, since the majority of us here belong to Samir, at the conference, make sure that you get to take advantage of presenting a paper in one of the thematic strands. I started there actually, and support was overwhelming from that process. Hence, for some of those people that inspired me that time as a student presenter are really part of the circle that I've kept for the last 17 years. And we still constantly engage. Some of them we co-publish as co-authors. And it is really powerful when you maximize your opportunity to be at that conference and find people with the same passion, and then develop relational bridges that can help with your professional development. So these are some of the types of publications. Again, as I said, these are not exhaustive, but some of them that you can be able to take advantage of. So some of the publication strategies. I thought this is an important conversation also to add as we develop our thoughts around why we publish, what motivates us. And so some of the strategies, again, that I use personally is in form of my questioning. And it has really helped me for the last 17 years as I continue in this path. I constantly revisit my motives. I constantly revisit my interests. I constantly revisit my professional development goals and my professional development vision. Where do I want to be, and all those things. And so these questions do provoke my thinking. And I thought I need just to present them here. Perhaps they might also help you, or you may come up with your own that would help you in your own journey also. So first question I constantly ask myself, is there synergy between what I want to write and my professional goal? Very powerful, I think, and a deep question. Is there a link? Because if there is no link, the energy will not be there. You need to make sure that there is energy, there's synergy between why you're writing, the question of motive, versus your professional development and where you want to go. As an M&A practitioner, as a researcher, as a, a development practitioner, and we are talking here in terms of publication. Is there linkages? Is there a synergy between my personal development and my professional development goals, right? The other question I also ask is there a synergy between my personal and institutional goals, especially if you're in academia? Some people in academia that I've met write because, in academia, there is this one phrase I'm sure you've come across, publish or perish. Now it has gone to an extent that it's also linked to remuneration. Even job security. It's getting harder out there. And so sometimes, one's job is predicated to the output they have in terms of publications. And it can be very, very scary. And so sometimes people write, not because they're really passionate, not really because they do want to write. It's because there is an institutional demand. And this institutional demand does have some pressure around it, because if you don't publish, it start affecting your performance evaluation and reviews. And when it goes that direction, it start bordering on your job security. And so again, people have different strategies how they navigate. Those from academia can tell us how they navigate. I know how I do. But again, for me, I don't have a challenge on that level. It's just something that flows, but I know it's not automatic for everyone. And so it might be interesting for some of us who are on the platform that are from the academia, how they navigate this issue. Sometimes also it's not that they don't want to write or they're not passionate about writing, but it's about the topics that they need to write that are conflicting with what they love to write about. So again, that can also be a challenge. Yes, I thank you, Fazila. Fazila is saying that it's the first point is a good reminder for her, and she's happy that we've highlighted that. Very powerful. Please feel free to continue putting your thoughts on the chat box as we go along. I would like to know if there's any person from academia apart from me on the platform who struggles with my second question, a conflict between personal and institutional goals as far as writing is concerned. If there is one, please just share with us your idea and put it on the chat box. How perhaps you navigate a situation where there is probably no synergy between your personal intention and the institution. Right. And then the third question is that I ask myself is what counts and how do I achieve my writing goals without sacrificing my personal meaning? In other words, my motive, how do I achieve these goals without really sacrificing what I'm really passionate about? Again, there's a lot of negotiation with the different communities that you have to engage with. One community is your family, because we said, remember, that writing is quite a daunting task and it requires setting time aside. It requires, negotiating time off from the people you love most, from colleagues that they need your presence now and then, from your employer who needs to give you time off if you need time off to go and, to go and sit somewhere, go someplace a day or two, think through what you want to do, all those things. So there's a lot of negotiating that goes with publication, including yourself. There's also the internal battle sometimes. You don't write because you feel right. You write because you're passionate and you feel you have a goal to achieve. Sometimes you don't feel like writing. And perhaps maybe at some stage, we might also talking about how do you overcome the writing block? You've been writing constantly all your life. You've been writing reports, but now you want to write publications to be shared with the scholarly community. But you're at that stage where nothing seems to be clicking, no idea. Nothing really comes through powerfully to you that you think, I can put this down to be read. So how do you overcome that kind of a writing block? And we, as M&E practitioners who are constantly writing reports, constantly reviewing things, constantly sharing information, sometimes you get that place where you have no concrete idea and there is nothing seems that that is coming through to assist, to get you started. So it would be also interesting to know if anyone has experienced writing block, how do you overcome yours? How have you overcome it? Yeah, I don't have a slide of it, but we can talk about it. I didn't think about it, but this is, I think, it becomes very interesting to know how do you overcome a writing block. Feel free to put in your thoughts there. I will just continue because of the time, but let's just get the chat going there. All right. Okay. So those are my some of my strategies of how I get to start writing. So what counts? Journal articles versus book chapters versus books. Which one do you target? I'd like also to know if there's anyone who struggles with this. Where do you want to put your energy? Or do you want to do like me? And I do not encourage it unless you have the amount of energy. I do all the three each year. But sometimes I find myself doing only the first two, journal articles. The first, yeah, so I do journal articles and I co-edit books. Book chapters sometimes rank, the lowest for me. But when I'm invited and I have time and the book is addressing an interesting, topic, I do make time to contribute as a book chapter. But I find myself resonating more with journal articles and co-editing books. But I would like to know, and let me have a sense, let's take a minute and let me get a sense of where do you place your efforts for you? What counts? Let's get started. Who would be the first one to say, what counts for you first? Is it a journal article? Is it a book chapter? Is it books? What counts? Is it accredited journals? Is it non-accredited? Is it conference proceeding? What counts for you? Who will be the first one courageous enough to tell us what counts for them when you think about it? Right? Who's there? As I said, mine, firstly, I think about journal articles. That just comes first for me. Before I think about book chapters and books. Journal articles come from N accredited ones again. That comes out first for me. The reason being that, you know, it's part of the professional development and of course required by the university. And so sometimes I find that universities, I don't know whether it's everyone everywhere, but I find sometimes universities are becoming kind of very specific on where to place emphasis, where you find that books and book chapters don't get the same level of preference as journal articles, and especially in peer-reviewed journals. And also the rating of the journal. Remember, I said there is Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So you find that some institutions do say you have to publish in Q1 and Q2. I'm at UKZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal, and in my college, College of Public Administration and Governance, it has to be Q1 or Q2. They don't recognize Q3 and Q4, for example. So I find universities becoming a bit more tighter with where you publish, and the nature of journal articles that you're writing. So by that virtue only, then it means that strategically, the first preference for me, what counts is journal articles in a peer-reviewed, accredited journal. That's why I want to put my effort in, but it doesn't work like that all the time. So let me get to know, give me some indication, what counts for you first? Thank you, Timothy, about writing blog. You overcome it by taking breaks, doing something refreshing, energizing, and also getting feedback, bouncing ideas, and having discussion with co-authors and colleagues. Perfectly said. Right, let me get an idea about, welcome, Mohammed. I see you just joined us. So let's get an idea, what counts for you as a seasoned publisher, if you're one of those, and Marilyn Lin, you as a first timer, what would count for you, Marilyn? Let's start from there first. Just type in your thought there, or you can unmute yourself. Oh, journal article, great stuff, great stuff. Right. Why would you do that? What do you focus there, Marilyn, if I just follow up on that? Right. While Marilyn is putting her thought there, anybody else who want to share their thoughts? What counts for you first? As a starting point. Perfect said. Right. Thank you, Marilyn. All right. I'll continue again because of the set of time. And please feel free to continue posting your thoughts there as they populate. Oh, Fazila says it's conference paper first, and then journal article. Why, Fazila? Give us a reason. One of the many. Why is a conference paper comes first for you than a journal article? Right? While Fazila is sharing her thought, we'll continue. Right, selecting a topic. This is one of the harder ones too, also. I don't know about you colleagues, but I do struggle with this also now and then. Selecting a topic. How do you decide what to choose to write about and what informs your decision? Interesting. Right? Teboho says journal articles would count for him or her first, as it can be easily accessed by many. I agree. Perfectly said. Right. So selecting a topic, what to write about. Can I give you a minute or so to think about this? How do you decide what to write about at a personal level? How do you go about that, and what informs your decision? Before I share mine. Wow, Fazila, thank you for saying that because at a conference, it helps you to develop your ideas, get the inputs that you need from M&E community that helps to concretize the core ideas in the paper. Perfect strategy. I used to do this a lot of times in my earlier years by taking, and I still do. I especially like this year, I got, I think, 3 or 4 conferences that I'm aiming to present a paper. And yeah, so I'm going to use those as platforms to source out what the rest of the community thinks about. And then after the conference, then I'll put my paper. So great stuff. I agree with you 100%. 100% Fazila. Mohammed says there may be a difference between scientific papers, chapters, and socioeconomic papers and chapters. Well said. Yes, I agree 100%. It does so. So also that can influence your decision on where to place your effort at any one given time. Right. So how do you go about selecting a topic to write about? How do you decide what to write about and what informs your decision? Let me get some of your ideas before I share mine. Right. Leslie says generally one is to publish by addressing gaps in the literature. Yes, perfectly said. So understanding what are the gaps, will also inform how you go about searching for your literature and putting your thoughts together. Well said, Timothy. Thank you for sharing that with you. Right. Let's get to hear some other thoughts around that. How do you go about deciding a topic to write about and what informs your decision? Very interesting. Before I share mine. It's very, very, it looks very easy, but sometimes it's very tough question of how we go about thinking about this. And for me personally, while you think about your thoughts, for me personally, how do I decide what to write about? I stay curious all the time, as long as I'm interacting with information out there in the course of my work. I keep on getting, looking for, because I'm conscious about, so for example, 2023 is already decided. I already have what I'm working on. I'm already now thinking of 2024. I have what I call an ideas bank. Yeah. So when these ideas come, I put a note, could be 2 or 3 sentences, and post it there and keep it there as form of my electronic journal, so I can access it wherever I am, in any country or any place. And so as I look into that, the decision therefore will be, when I have enough of these ideas, perhaps maybe when I reach about 5 to 10, I start thinking now, okay, so which one do I take forward that has gravitas that I want to really put effort into in the coming writing cycle for myself? So that's how I go about deciding. Then thereafter, then I would decide, okay, which one of these that really resonates with what I want to do for that particular year. I must confess that I don't constantly write about M&E. I have other research interests, and sometimes also that does inform my decision. I create a balance, and like this year I'm focusing on M&E work. Last year I focused on governance and public participation. The other year I focused on electronic governance and use of ICTs in enabling democratic practices. So because of the vast research interest that I have, that does inform the decision that I take in terms of the topic that I want to write about. So this year, 2023, I'm thinking about and writing about evaluation. So when I get published in these areas, I'm going to share my article. But I'm working on some 2 topics around M&E practice. So that also does inform my decision. So sometimes as researchers, we have areas of interest. I'm sure all of you're not all confined on M&E only. Perhaps you have some other, underlying research interest in M&E. It could be M&E and technology. It could be M&E and climate change. It could be M&E and gender. It could be M&E and community empowerment. There could be those areas. It could be just something outside of M&E. So it does shape your decision where you want to focus and the choice of the topic. I see Fazila says, as an M&E practitioner, you get to implementation experience of and applying certain M&E approaches and ideas of new methods and approaches that provoke response. 100%. Mohammed says, for M&E projects, it's evident that the person is following the standard program or PORs. Yeah, that could also be an interesting area that defines where you want, that informs your decision about your topic that you want to write. Right. Please continue writing. I need to move on to the next slide. And yeah, we can continue sharing those thoughts. Right. So how do you mine your data for the journal articles? Again, as I said, this is also a constant idea that you have to keep up front in your mind every time you think about writing, because you need to be aware upfront that majority of journal articles will require you to provide sources of information from a research experience. In other words, you either collected primary data, or it was informed by secondary data. However, there was a bit of a reprieve around the COVID 2020, 2021, and earlier parts of 2022, where journals were accepting articles not necessarily informed by data. It could have been desktop research or systematic research reviews, literature reviews. But now, I've seen from late last year, the majority of those journal articles or journals that were inviting people to write without necessarily having data substantiated, primary data to substantiate their thoughts, they are now going back to that original intention that you have to have some data, primary or secondary, to support your paper. So I did take advantage of that period, that reprieve period, the 2020, 2021, to publish as much as I could. And yeah, because but there were still levels of where you could collect it. One could collect data, through mechanisms such as, Zoom meetings or WhatsApp or telephonic conversations. So there was still a place where you could still collect primary data, but the journals were a bit lenient by acknowledging there is also levels of restrictions in most places around the world, where there was limited interactions at the personal level to be able to collect data, primary data. But you have to constantly think about, where do I get my data for my paper, and be able to know upfront that question is sorted before you get to start writing. Otherwise, you don't start writing, and then when you get the data or methodology section, you start thinking, okay, where do I get my data from? You need to have this question answered upfront before you start writing, so that even though you may not have that data with you, but you know where you get it. It might be you're going to do a primary field work. You might have to do secondary field work. It might be data that is already collected but has not been used for publication, and you may need to go through a process of seeking permission to use to use existing data, all those things. So so that question becomes very important, at least for me, and I would like to suggest also for you, as you go forward in your writing process, always think about, where do I get my data from as a source? Now, Timothy is asking a very interesting question here. How does one write a paper if you aren't registered with a university, when the majority of peer-reviewed journals are locked behind paywalls? Yeah, that's a constant challenge, my brother. I understand that. I have not restricted myself to that. But I can say also, don't restrict yourself. There's so many other journals out there that do not require you to be registered with a university to submit an article. But however, if you're a part of a university community, majority of the universities do have journals that they subscribe to, and therefore it requires you to perhaps think about submitting those journals where the university has subscribed. Yeah, sometimes it can be very restrictive, but don't let it hold you back. There also, you can publish outside of those ones. There are quite a few around the world where they accept papers that are not necessarily because you are part of a university community. Right. I would like to know from you colleagues, what are some of the sources? Okay. Yeah. So what are some of the sources you use for your to mine your data? Before I share mine, where do you get some of this data for your papers, or intend to get data for your paper that you intend to publish? Let's just get some thoughts around that. Feel free to put in your thoughts with the chat box. Where do you get your data from? For example, for the paper you intend to write today, or for the article that you intend to write this year, where do you intend to get your data from? Who'll be the first one to share with us their thoughts? Right? Where do you think you're gonna get your data from? For those who are publishing this year, whose goal is to publish at least submit an article this year, where do you think you're gonna get your data from? What's your source? Anyone? I'm sure there must be. Right. What do you think? Go ahead and just put in the thoughts there. But for the sake of time, and I'm actually already load shedding, let's get going. So some of the places where you can get some information for your journal article. Again, the list is not exhaustive. You can always add your thoughts. So Mohammed, I'm asking, where do you get your data? You get your data for your article. Right. Just responding to Mohammed. So there it is, Mohammed. I've just put a question there. Right. So one of the sources where you can get your data could be from dissertations, master's thesis, especially because that's a publication or documentation that has gone through the research review process from the university, I would imagine. Sometimes it's you have data that has not been published, and you'll probably even have a manuscript ready, but never got a chance to have it published. Sometimes it's an existing or easily collected data sets. For those who do longitudinal studies, we always have this kind of data set. Many people, we already have lots of information that we collect and keep it, but we haven't had a chance to process it and use it for data writing, for publication purposes. You can get information from grant proposals and technical reports. We constantly writing research proposals and concept notes and all that. It could be also from your presentation and lecture notes. That could be also a source of data for you, especially in the COVID situation. There was a lot of publications around how do online teaching, for example, those who are in academia, who had to adapt very quickly to use electronic means, online means of teaching and managing, students and all that. Very fascinating research that is coming out there around these issues, and that could also be a source of data. Yes, Mohammed is saying also it can be from the literature of about a given data. Agreed. Yeah, it could also be consultation materials. Sometimes we do consultation meetings, and over a period of time you collect data from them. Sometimes it's also through shared authorship. We co-author with others and bring in thoughts and share thoughts to be able to write a paper or papers together with colleagues. So they also come with their data or their information and sources, and therefore we're able to get the work going. So again, as I said, the list is not exhaustive, but just to remind ourselves that it's a question that you need to think upfront when you choose to publish. You got to think upfront: where do I get the information for my data? Right. So what are some of the factors that influence publication considerations? Some of these factors include historical factors. Some of them are structural, some of them are personal, like we had discussed, some of them are professional career development. And this is very important to keep on reminding ourselves, because it's where and nothing else is going. Yes, thank you so much, Soamate, saying that sometimes you get data from secondary sources such as demographic and health service, multiple indicator cluster service, appropriator service, population census, and administrative data. Yeah, that's very true. So these factors, we had to consider them a little bit in our earlier slides, so I'm not going to spend much of the time there, but again, just to emphasize this, there's always a motivation behind your interest in writing, and it's always good to know why you want to subject yourself to some process that can be a bit very daunting, sometimes can be discouraging, but it's also very worthwhile, right? And so I tried to put some of this in a slide form to see how we get to, how we get our motivations organized and be able to navigate the different motivations and persuasions. So again, I won't spend much time on this. Is a bit of detailed there, but we're looking at, if you think about the historical motive, is that, if you're in an environment where publishing is a non-negotiable KPA, or key performance area, then you have no choice. In academia, for example, you have no choice. If you work there and you're teaching or you're doing research, publications is a given. You have to. Then you come in and you fit into an historical trend that the only way to be in this environment, apart from the other things that they've hired you for, it's constant publishing. Sometimes it's, you're in an environment where the environment is very supportive. You have a leader who supports and values publication, so they will give you support that you need to continue feeding to their mission, to their goal, to make it possible for that unit or department achieve its goals. And therefore always constantly explore opportunities where there is support to make you move forward. In other words, there is not only just the historical motive of a unit that people do right constantly because it's part of their job requirement, but the environment is also conducive and supportive to make sure that you do right. So what happens if you find yourself in an environment where there is no requirement, so to speak, to publish or to write, but you're driven to write? Again, negotiate with whoever you report to, so that in case you want to use data that is available within the department or within the unit that has been collected through the work of the organization, you don't get yourself into trouble by publishing what you've not been authorized to do. But there's always room, more often than not, to be permitted, because it also adds value to the organization or to the institution, where you document your thoughts out of the work that has been done and share it with the scholarly community out there. Right. Let's go to the next. Some practical steps in the writing process. Again, I find this very useful in my own process. As much as I've done this over the years, I still constantly get back to this and kind of reflect. And again, this is just my process. You're most welcome to conceptualize yours and how you go about it. So first, you start by pre-journaling your ideas. I then decide on the main idea to write about, given my areas of interest. Then develop an outline for your article. Most of the journal articles goes with a standard format. Most of you know that. And then go ahead and start writing a first draft. It's only that we don't have much time. We could have gone into the details about this because each section requires a different thinking around it. So for example, when we are talking about journaling your ideas, it goes back to the earlier slides I've mentioned about mining your data. So you're constantly thinking about, what do I want to present out there? What do I want to share with the scholarly community? And then think about the data, and then the availability of data. Then you decide, now finally I got it. I got the main idea. The main idea is this and that and the other. Then you shape it that in your first blank page. Write your thought there. Then come up with an outline. Often it's important to go through, to use the standard format, but sometimes also I need to say that it's also important to look at the journal that you are targeting to submit your article to, and look whether they have a different format, because sometimes journals do also have their own formats, the way they like their papers to be presented, that they will be published in that journal. So always look into the journal requirements of how they like their papers to be presented. You'll always find that information under author guidelines. Every journal has that section, author guidelines. Go please look at that, so that to minimize the one of the many reasons why papers are rejected by journals. It's the first place. If your paper is not aligned, the way it is structured is not aligned with what the journal accepts, that becomes your first rejection place. They don't even spend time reading what you wrote. So you want to minimize chances of your paper being rejected upfront by aligning your paper with the author guidelines as they have been provided. And of course, I can't overemphasize about the importance of editing and proofreading. Very, very important. Never submit a paper or an article or a book chapter before this process has been done, because that, of course, creates the chances of rejection. And you want to always, even if you may be a seasoned publisher, you need always to make sure that your first and foremost aim is to get your paper at least considered for review. Yeah, you need to aim for that at the most minimum. Aim that my paper will be accepted for review. Then the other things can follow later once they have engaged with it and they give you, as I said, in the second half of the year, I intend to offer a webinar around dealing with feedback, overcoming criticism, and all that. So you want to make sure that you get to a place at least of feedback and positive feedback, and not a rejection because either A, the paper structure isn't aligned with the journal requirements, or B, loads and loads of typos and grammatical issues and clear sentences, all those kind of things. You don't want to get that to be, because that already creates a chance for you to be rejected firsthand. And I would like to know if there's anything else you'd like to add to this writing process for those who have published before, but we can also use this as a framework going forward in terms of guiding your writing process. All right, so some early stages of manuscript development. Now, assuming that you've gone through this process, you have, have a clear idea, you know where to get your data from, you have managed to start putting your thoughts in your idea bank, you've started even putting some writing around the various sections because you've come up with an outline. You're now working on your first draft. Now, when you're there, we want to talk about the early stages of your manuscript development. Wow. Again, this is my own experience. It may differ from us on the platform and from other places where you may have found, people writing. So I think about what I'm writing constantly, and I do it daily. It's amazing when you get to this level of where you're constantly thinking about writing. Remember, we started by talking about your publishing goals. And so when you have the goal in mind and you know that you have limited time for all this process to be done, and you're aiming to have at least submitted an article by December 31st, you got to think about your topic continuously. You got to think about it daily. Well, the daily, because you want to make sure that you have a motivation that really pushes you. And I always do at first use natural language, just that is meaning eliminate all scientific lingo as best as you can in your writing as you start, and think about how do you want to frame your argument. So you're thinking about your idea, but also ask yourself, what is my main argument? What do I want to pass on? What's the core message that I want to pass on through my publication? Now, let me tell you, colleagues, that doesn't happen automatically, and it doesn't happen once. For those who have written before and constantly writing, you will discover that it's a constant struggle. You write at some stage and think, so what's my core message? What do I want my readers to gain out of this article? Remember also, the editors also look for it upfront. So assuming that your article at the time of submitting for review meets all the criteria, then the second thing the editors ask, and I'm asking this also, I'm saying this because I'm also an editor of two international journals. That's the first thing we look for in a paper once it has been submitted. What is the core argument? Yeah. And sometimes you find people just flood information in a journal article that they are submitting, even though they may have followed the structure, but the journal article does not explicitly present what's the core argument. And it's very important to minimize your rejection rate, especially if you're aiming to publish in the high level top 2 ranked journals, that is Q1 and Q2. That is from my experience, it's been one of the most reasons why papers get rejected, especially in those journals, because the core argument, if it's not explicit, you're putting work on the editors to start thinking or to start trying to find it. That creates a chance for rejection. So I think about it daily so that I can be able to frame my core argument. Then I create questions and phrases and topical sentences to provoke my thinking. Yeah, it's a process that works for me, and perhaps maybe you have your own idea of how you get that done. But it's always important to know that there is a process that you follow that provokes your thinking, constant thinking, because you cannot just sit anywhere daily and just thinking about your journal. What is provoking your thinking? What do you want to say, for example, in my introduction? What do I want to say in my literature review? What kind of literature do I want to look for? What are the phrases? So for example, you're writing about community empowerments in evaluations, so you're constantly thinking about that. So how do M&E practitioners bring communities into the evaluation processes? You use questions like those ones to provoke your thinking, but that doesn't happen naturally unless you're thinking about it. And then create those questions, jot them down in your ideas bank, let your thoughts drift around the topic to see what emerges out of your thought process. So don't be in a rush. Sometimes we rush so quickly when you're thinking, because of a variety of reasons. It could be time constraints, it could be, pressure to make sure that you meet the goal, all those things. But I find that sometimes when you rush you miss also insights. Yeah. So if I'm one of the papers I'm writing this year is around how do we bring community into community? How do we empower communities to participate in evaluations that are donor driven, for example? That's my topic that I'm writing this year. And it's very interesting. And I'm constantly thinking about it, given the experiences I've seen locally in South Africa and elsewhere around the continent, around the world, how these processes do play out. Context is one of those things, but there are other factors. So I'm constantly thinking and journaling these thoughts and allowing them to drift, and percolate, and then revisiting them, and then work broadly within the constraints of your data without stifling the creativity and the unconscious process. Again, this is very important. When we must resist the temptation to not stretch our data to say the things it doesn't say, because we want to show that we are creative and innovative in the way we want to package the paper. That's a very serious academic offense, because editors will pick it up. When data is presented and overstretched to say something that has been spoken about in the follow-up sections post the methodology and the finding section, that when editors trying to see the correlation between what the discussion is saying versus the data that has been presented, they cannot see the link. Of course, it doesn't mean they will reject it. They will, one of the reasons why they will refer the paper back is to trying to address that gap in case they have an issue about the overstretching of data. That's what I mean by the constraints of your data. And having also experience of being on the other side of the table as an editor, I do see this sometimes in papers. And I don't think it's done unintentionally. It's always the pressure to present an article and get it published. But always work within the constraints of your data. Don't be tempted to say what your data doesn't say, because obviously it will be caught up by the editors, and that can also create other problems for you, depending what's the level of seriousness around that. It can also be, most of these journals will have 3 to 5, peer reviewers. And you may find 2 who say, for example, the author needs to address this issue around the discussion because it's not linked properly with the findings or the data that has been presented. And you may find the other 3 saying outright rejection. And sometimes editors go to the majority view. So you want to minimize situations where your paper gets to the place where they have to decide the fate because of these different peer reviewers' responses. We're also going in when I do that follow-up webinar in the second half of the year, we're going to deal also with the issues of how do you respond to these reviewer comments. I struggle with them, but I think I have some insights that I can share with colleagues at that time. Right, the other number 5, don't critique or organize your ideas yet. Don't critique or organize your ideas yet, or try to be too practical strategic at the early stages. Remember, you are developing the thought line. You're developing core argument. You're developing your structure of your paper in a way that is coherent. Sometimes we get tempted to move too fast and start criticizing even before you're writing. Sometimes that critical review, it might be useful, but some stage it can also become an energy sapping exercise, and it can deflate your intense interest and can deflate your motivation. So just let the ideas flow. Don't over criticize them at this stage. You're just developing thoughts and a frame for your paper. Make notes, as I said, and put them in your journal bank, idea bank. Number 7, encourage friends and colleagues on your ideas. So if I would assume that all of us have some, in this level of professional development, you have some safe spaces where you're free to be yourself and be able to share your thoughts, random as they could be, raw as they can be, and you trust the individuals that you're interacting with, that they won't shoot your ideas down. They will not, but they will love you enough to tell you what you need to hear. Because sometimes you may just talk to people who will tell you yes, or tell you what you want to hear and affirm whatever thing. It's good to have that kind of balanced colleagues who are able to tell you, my friend, I think this idea could be perhaps more powerful if you package it this way. Maybe, my friend, your title now reads like a paragraph. Maybe we need to reduce it. Normally I use, for example, for titles, I use as a standard of making sure that it's not more than 12 words, yeah, so that it's very clear and sharp and not ambiguous. Sometimes when it's beyond, I use 12 to 15 words as a guide. So when I write a title, for example, and it's more than 15 words, I already know my idea is not clear yet in my head, right? I use that as a standard for myself. You may also want to use that, or may also want to find something. But for me, the moment it's more than 15 words, it's a paragraph. I'm already drifting, or the idea has not percolated clearly. It needs, remember that is also one of the reasons that editors also may reject your paper upfront. When they read a title and they think, they start asking, what is this person trying to communicate? And when you start creating those kind of questions in an editor's mind or peer reviewer's thoughts, then you're also creating situations where they start doubting what else you've said in the paper, because the idea is not clear up front. Therefore, they expect the body of the paper may also be not very clear. So always ensure that your title is very crisp. I use that as my own personal standard. Please feel free to share your thoughts. How do you use yours? So engage friends and colleagues. I really do have that. I use this very often, number 7. Some of them are on this platform, and we've created a safe space for all of us that we are able to share our thoughts and be able to give each other critical review. And we take it, that is a gift from my colleague who also shares the same interest to see the paper published. There are some people that are not very good with that. The first thing they do is to shoot your idea down and all those kind of, so avoid those ones. Use those ones that really, love you enough to tell you the truth, but also care enough to help you shape whatever needs to be shaped. And of course, lastly but not least, always read the relevant literature. The idea of having a topic upfront, clear in your head, is because it will also guide you in choosing what kind of literature you want to focus in, because you cannot write about everything in one journal article. There's always the temptation of putting so much information. And of course, journal articles also have clear guidelines about the length of journals, articles that are being presented into their journals. So always adhere to that length, so that also it guides you to the amount of information you need to put per section, so that including references and any other materials that they may ask you to put in, such as appendices, to make sure that you're within the limits of the word length. The other rejection reason is because of papers that if a journal article allows a maximum of 5,000 and you submit an article with 5,010, you've already exceeded. You're assuming that they'll be lenient and say, you know what, it's just 10 words above. No, there could be a reason for rejection. Remember, some of these high-ranking journals in Q1 and Q2, they look for every opportunity to reject a paper. The idea is to enhance the quality of submission, adherence to author guidelines, and quality, and all those things. You want to pass the test fast and upfront. I want my paper at least to be reviewed, to be submitted to a peer review. So if you have to send something that does not align with them, then it will be a stage that means that you're going to be rejected. So read the relevant literature so it guides you in what you need to populate your paper with. Right. Let's go to the next one, because of our time cost. Writing as a lifestyle. So again, not to repeat what we've already been saying, that passion for writing starts because you really, really love to document your process, or you are nurturing the love for documenting your thoughts. So Make it a lifestyle, because then it becomes something you don't struggle with. You may struggle with the other technical aspects that some of them we've touched along the way, but when you make it as a lifestyle, it becomes easier for you to put your thoughts on paper. Yeah. Before I started writing scholarly material, I started with conferencing, presenting my thoughts in a conference. Samia conference was and has been one of the many platforms that I've used for that. But also I do publish op-eds that I've sent off to newspapers around the country. Start with something that makes you not to feel overwhelmed, and you develop your passion of writing as a lifestyle. Then it becomes easier to transition into writing scholarly materials. So think about your article often, post your outline on the wall and write on, I do this often. Again, these are my thoughts. So once I've written it, I print it in great font, put it in somewhere in my office where I'm able to see it constantly. And as I see it, the idea is to keep this thought percolating every time. I may not have to sit down immediately, but on the moment my eye sees what I'm trying to write in my writing wall, I get to start thinking about what I want to write. Make your lifestyle compatible with the writing. Schedule outings for writing, exercise meals, walk, phone call time, strategic writing breaks, things like that, so that you can get this process going. Again, I bring this as an early stages of your writing process, because you're still developing the framework for your writing. You're thinking through it. You're thinking about what you want to do, which angle you want to take about this area of work, and all those things that are very important. Be friends with other academic writers and talk about your project. Again, as I said in the last slide, always find colleagues that provide support on your writing journey, and so that you can be able to you're assured of a platform where you can bounce off ideas and receive feedback, constructive feedback that can help you with your writing process. And then see every presentation as an oral summary and an outline for a future manuscript. This is where it comes in very handy to take advantage of presenting papers at a conference. And I'm assuming that majority of us here belong to Samia. Please do take advantage of Samia conferencing. I really, really encourage that. I grew and constantly grow from that platform, and I can't thank the association enough. It's one of my value propositions and what I derive from being a member of Samia, for example. And if you're not a member, they didn't pay me to give a promo, but I'm just encouraging you. If you're not a member of Samia, please do join. It is worth your money and it's worth your time. I really grew a lot from presenting my thoughts as raw as they were. I didn't feel that hesitation. I just decided every conference I'm taking advantage to present a paper. Except last year, it's only the year that I didn't present, but I've always taken advantage of presenting a paper at Samia conference and other conferences, as they come my way, depending on the area of interest. So, but I use that platform as an oral summary where I'm presenting a possible future transcript. Again, I would like to encourage you, whenever you find yourself an opportunity to present a paper, not only at Samia conference, but anywhere else, take it to the next step. Once you've received feedback, use that feedback to now develop that presentation paper into a manuscript that you can submit to a journal for further consideration. And present your work often if you can use it to think aloud about your research writing. I can't overemphasize that enough. I've used this as a strategy and I constantly do so. Part of my goals, again, apart from the writing, at least one goal per year is to present at a local or international conference in one of the areas that I'm publishing about. So for me, that is working smart. You engage a scholarly community or practitioners community on a paper that you're writing, receive feedback for free, so to speak, and use that feedback now to translate that into a manuscript. And I can tell you that much, I've always have almost 98% success in this one. And I'm putting 98 because sometimes I don't get the 2 papers published, but at least get 1 published per year. And that majority of that comes from the feedback I receive from these conference presentations. And it just, for me, I value that process. So that's what I do, and I hope that would make sense to you, so that you can also start finding ways to get your process going in a way that is meaningful for you. Right? How do you establish a routine? Now let's recap again. We have come from the process. We have now gotten an idea. We are busy with our first draft. We have answered all the right questions about where do I get my data from? What is the topic I want to write from? What is my core argument? Now we're already starting to write. I've engaged my colleagues and my friends. They've given me their feedback. There is overwhelming response that I need to, this is a good idea to publish. Now I'm here. So how do I establish my routine? Know your routine writing rhythm. Every one of us has a writing rhythm. We don't constantly write every time. We don't constantly think every time, but we have a rhythm. So think about which spot provokes your best writing moment for you to get ideas. When during your day or during your week do you get them? And then the how. So how do I process my thinking? Do I use, for example, a journal to write my thoughts as they come on my mind when I'm in that spot? I think it's clear what I mentioned earlier, getting some, driving away to a place, quiet place, taking a break into some place and just sit there and say, this time I'm in this place to think about my writing for this paper. So establish your rhythm, right? Thinking and writing and the how. And then, of course, watch out on those helpful habits that can minimize your ability to write. From work, from home, music, TV, computer, solitude, pets, time blocks, all those. You're constantly working around those potential hindrances that can limit your thinking capabilities at the time when you find out your best writing form. So when you go to, for example, you want to sit in a quiet place. If some people think best when there's a lot of commotion and lots of noise. I think majority of us do want to sit where there is quietness. Then that's a moment you don't answer unnecessary phone calls and you're not constantly looking at your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever it is, if you're in these social media platforms, all those things that can, if you set time to sit somewhere to think about your paper, discipline yourself to do that. Otherwise, then that time is not meaningful. Then set a timeline for completing a good draft for each section of the manuscript. So again, you have an outline that you're already working on, set a timeline. So I'm going to work on these 2 weeks, I'm going to work only on my introduction. The next 2 weeks, I'm going to work on my methodology. The next 4 days, I'm going to work on the first draft of my data presentation. So you have those kind of timelines to help you guide your time usage and effort that you're putting through. Otherwise, it becomes very, you might find yourself drifting and, overspending time in different sections. And you find, again, the year has gone. For me, it is very imperative that by October, I have submitted the 2 journal articles for consideration for publication. So my aim is also by October, those papers must have gone out. I don't do that. I'm not going to be writing past that. Past that, I'm thinking of the next year. So November, December, and part of my January, I'm thinking about the next coming year. So I have this timeline that is very dedicated intentionally to get to say that I have my good draft. So my good draft is ready by June, so that I can bounce it off my colleagues that that I co-author with sometimes, or some senior colleagues in the profession who are also publishers, and they can be able to give me their critical feedback or something like that. Some colleagues at the university, some I work with, they're just colleagues that we work with, and especially if it's I'm writing in an area that we do work with as an organization. So by June, I have a draft that I can bounce to about 5 to 10 people. I don't know why I use 10, but I send it. That's the biggest number that I have that I bounce off my article. So I get feedback from different people who have different interests, and when they look at it, they will tell me this and that, and I use that to shape up the paper so that by end of July, beginning of August, it goes to first peer reviewer, my own peer reviewer. That could be a senior academic or somebody that I know that is very seasoned in the area that I'm writing. They can also give me now a critical review, just like an editor would have done. Then I get back that feedback, I incorporate it. Then by August, that paper has gone to a proofreader and editor. Get all these issues of of grammar and others sorted. Let me tell you, no one is perfect in these areas. Even if you're a seasoned author, please don't overlook that process. Never submit a paper that has not been proofread and edited grammatically. It's also one of the sources and the reasons of rejection. So by August, that part of my life is done. Then September, October, time for submission and get the paper done. So that happens routinely, but it's also because there is a good timeline that I've disciplined myself to use, and it's constantly working for me over the last 17 years. I'll be surprised if I would not be able to be where I am at this point in time if I would not have been following this process personally. Then what we spoke about a writer's block, don't believe in it. Believe that writing takes shape from your unconscious to increasing your outflow. So, keep on fighting that writer's block by constant exploring opportunities of course, relaxing. Sometimes, the pressure of life and doing life can become a hindrance, but find opportunities where you can find time to relax, think strategically during your breaks, and of course, rest sections before revisiting them for best results. Again, so sometimes when you've written a section or you've reviewed it for yourself, like an introduction, give it some time to rest. Go to the next section, write your methodology, write your findings. And then before you circulate, go back to your introduction, find out, did I really package my information correctly? This way you establish a routine that you follow that helps you by the time you're sending your first draft to your colleagues and friends and people you trust to give you insightful commentary. You are confident in what you're sending out there. You also don't want them to just send them something that they send back and say, hey, my friend, this paper doesn't have a flow. Or my friend, I can't even get the gist of what you're trying to say. That might discourage you, especially if you've spent the last 6 months writing about it. All along, you're thinking you're on the right track until somebody else with an external eye reads it and think, man, something is not gelling. The sections are not fitting into one another and all those kind of things. So you want to rest the sections as you go about so that you can come back with a fresh eye, rework a section, or maybe if it's okay, it's okay. You don't have to, over criticize yourself. So this is my routine that I've established, and it has been working for me. And I'm constantly revisiting, but I'm happy to share with you. For me, so far it's working. Right. I think probably we're going to be ending here because I see we got 10 minutes to 11. We will continue next time, but let's work around this. And so I can also open it up for the floor for any thoughts, questions, and commentary in the last 10 minutes of our time. So the writer's block. It's not new, we've already spoken about, but it's always important to think about it and how we can overcome it whenever we find ourselves into this situation. I can tell you it always knocks at the door at some stage in your writing process, and always arm yourself on how you're going to overcome it. Some of the causes insofar as publication is concerned, some of the causes are journal rejections, disagreements with book publishers, lack of time sometimes, you're doing life, personal circumstances, anxiety, and lack of resources, etc. Some of the symptoms, how do you notice you're experiencing a mental block, a writer's block? You feel mentally hazy. The ideas are not as clear as you would want to. You can't manage to lift that brain fog no matter how hard you try. You feel emotionally drained. You just can't seem to get inspired by anything anymore, let alone putting it down on paper. These are some of the symptoms that can start giving you an idea. Maybe perhaps I need some time off, just to get away from something that I'm writing or thinking about writing and get some inspiration elsewhere. So how do you overcome this? Enhance your workspace. What do I mean? So like, for example, I'm a visual person, so I like to put my thoughts into paper. So you find my office is always littered with, pasting of papers that of a particular paper that I'm writing on a certain section of my office, and I constantly look at that. So I color code them, I draw things, just something that makes me interested to keep on revisiting that my writing corner. I call it my writing corner. Plan a time and make a habit. Once you've identified your best hours of writing and productivity, then stick to that routine. Unless something changes drastically that makes you revisit that planning of that time, but make a plan to stay committed and have a discipline around it so that it becomes a habit. Then try what I call a writing prompt. Sometimes it's just you don't have all these ideas all figured out upfront. So prompt yourself to write something, a sentence or sentences or a paragraph, and paste it there on your writing wall or file it in your journal about the same paper. And you will come back to it later and find out maybe actually the thought was right. I just need to develop this further to clarify my own thoughts. But that's how you do that. When you get to that place, you feel mentally hazy and don't think like you can really think through this, but there is some idea that is not fully processed, put it down. And then I always don't give it a name. So don't call it a chapter. Don't call it a section. Just put it down and leave it there hanging, as open as it can be. And then it's just the idea here is to make sure that you go past the block in your mind that perhaps you are mentally exhausted because you're doing other types of work that also demand some level of energy on you. And so it's not something that you can avoid, and there's nothing wrong in getting experiencing writer's block, but don't stay there, because then if you stay there, it means there's a high level probability that you're not going to be able to continue with your writing. So colleagues, because of our time, I would like to leave it there. We'll definitely pick up from there. Next time we were going to look into these things, general submission and all that. But I would like to spend the next 5 or so minutes before we conclude our time together with responding to any questions, burning questions, or anyone want to share any thoughts that could have been provoked by that presentation so far, and any other thing you'd like to share with us. Anyone with any questions that you'd like to ask, and or ideas you'd want to share, or something has stood out for you from the presentation that you'd want to share with us. That is also welcome. I'd like to know if there is any of the content we've covered so far that has really provoked you to think differently about your writing process, and anything around that. Anyone, just start from anywhere, any thoughts, just put it on the chat box and we get going. There's quite a lot, I think, that we've spoken, and we can always go back to it as often as we have this opportunity to do so. Any burning thoughts, any questions, any commentary about what you've gained as an insight? I would also love to hear if there was any insight you gained, or something that you used to know, but somehow you lost track of it, but now through the presentation you have kind of rekindled it and you think it's something you can hang on to. Let me start first of all by asking Marilyn, yours is your beginning, you're actually at the beginning stage. What stood out for you that you think now can give you the courage to start writing? You're free to unmute yourself and share with us, or you can post it on the chat box, whichever works well for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paul. I think for me, the entire presentation has just been so insightful as to, venturing into this new realm for me. And I think particularly what stood out for me is presenting a paper at a conference as a starting point,
correct.
to get your ideas out there into the scholarly community and to crystallize ideas better. So I think what would also be helpful, but obviously due to the lack of time, we wouldn't really be able to get into the actual process of, identifying a particular journal and that. So I'm still very keen to learn more about the practical side of just the process itself as well in that regard.
Good. Thank you so much, Mary-Lynn. That's very powerful. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm happy to hear that also provoked interest. I got all that stuff about how do you go to identifying a journal. I think it was somewhere not far from this slide. Working through that, the abstracts, the keywords, how do you go about choosing them? So, okay, I had an exercise around that, how to do the structures and all that. Yeah, time, Mary-Lynn, just doesn't sit with us. I had all that covered, but there's always a next time. We can always revisit that, or I can even do, one-on-one whenever you have a time. Just let me know. We can always create time and go through this. If you have time to do that, you just need to let me know. Yeah, but yeah, it was all covered in here. How do you go the steps on literature review, the methodology section, how do you establish that, how you do your findings, how you do recommendations, on that, how you do your cover pages, steps in submission, in review, reasons for rejection. So we've tried some of those, how people get rejected, requests for resubmission and all that. Yeah, Mary-Lynn, I wish we had the luxury of time. We could have gone on all that. And that's why I started by saying the aim was not to complete the presentation. The aim was to really get to percolate these ideas, because I could have rushed through all that and get to the nitty-gritties, but I may have missed, some of us in the process. But I'm available anytime that we could have this, even with a smaller group that would be interested. Very much. We can just always set time aside to do that.
Now, thank you for that offer. I think we'll be in touch regarding that. Thank you.
I can sense you're already going to take the offer on. You're most welcome, Marilyn. All right. Any other thoughts before we call it a day? Right. Let me take advantage of this moment then, first of all, to thank each and every one of you for really taking time on a Saturday morning to join me in this conversation. And as much as I do this, I really do enjoy also interaction with peers like yourselves who are also in the process of writing, are continuously writing. And every time I have an opportunity to either do this at different places, institutions of learning, or communities of practice like ourselves, it's always something new that I learn and I write, even especially when I'm preparing. And so thank you again for giving me that opportunity. I would also want to thank Sami in the absentia for giving us the opportunity to use the platform to do this work. And I'm hoping that we'll get some time to do the follow-up presentation to continue from here until now. The next presentation, perhaps maybe before I deal with how to deal with feedback, we'll probably continue from where we've left. It will start straight from here, how to work your steps in a journal submission. And so that we can work through this process. It's a process by itself, and you need to get it right so that you can get to minimize the chances of your article being rejected and all that. So we start from here next time, and I know probably we'll have people who have not been in the part of this first one now, but hopefully they will be able to catch with us. But we'll start from here and do the next one, because from here and now it's a practical work. How you really working with your article, and maybe at that stage I like whoever will be part of the process to have their article with them, so that we can go through with your article, looking at my suggestions and reading at your article and see, okay, this is why I need to sharpen, this is why I need to change, this is why I need to consider, and so that we make it as practical exercise as possible. That will be the next one, the next webinar I do on publication, and perhaps we'll end up now with the third one on dealing with feedback. Right. Thank you so much, Fazila. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I look more for next time opportunity to be able to do these workshops together as colleagues. It's 11 o'clock. I want to stop sharing here and to thank you again for making time. Please do have yourself a good weekend. And the link to the presentation will be sent to Samir, and they are going to share with the rest of the Samir membership for their own learning purposes. And please watch out for the next presentation. They did ask me that they're going to even ask me for do another follow-up event, not be part of the KZN MELN part, because we already have an outline of presentation that we're going to be doing, but they probably to be under Samir. Please watch out for that communication whenever it will come back. Otherwise, I'm also available to do this at a group level outside of the KZN MELN or Samir, in case there's sufficient number of people that are willing to take time off to do this and to go through a process. I'm very much available. Thank you so much, colleagues. Have a good weekend and be safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.